and happy Monday morning to you. We are back with another one of our members from the LEAP community, LEAP for Ladies. And every single Monday, we spotlight another one of our members. And we actually spotlighted Pam Wilson, who is a writer, a blogger. She does video or audio casts. There's so much that she does. And we spotlighted her as well in our newsletter a couple of weeks ago. That's what we do here in the LEAP community. We take your brand and we spotlight you so you can be seen, be heard, and be visible. So today, Pam, this is one of my favorite subjects, which is speak up, to use your voice to share your stories. And that's kind of how I started with that radio show and the podcast, Speak Up to Lead Up, when I was, with Lead Up for Women so many years ago. And that's where I met you, because my very first collaboration anthology book that I was in, Pam Wilson was the editor. So Pam, welcome to your Member Monday Spotlight.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I am so glad to be here. A little nervous, I'm going to be honest, but I am so glad to be here. And I know that you just want to put it good out in the world. So I'm trusting you.
Yes. And it's been a wild ride since you've met me. And I'm sure you could tell by the very first chapter I wrote that I meant business. Like I was out here on a mission, and my mission is for all women to feel confident, to be able to be interviewed like you are today, Pam, because we all have to use our voices. We have something to say. We all have experiences. We all have these amazing stories, and you get to, because you've chosen to take those stories and put them on audiocast. Let's talk about that and when you started doing that and why you've been doing that.
So I've always been a storyteller. From the time I can remember, I've been a storyteller before I could even actually write. And then when I could write, I started writing stories all through my life, completely through my life. And honestly, my whole dream before Carrie Bradshaw was to go to New York or Chicago and write about life in magazines. And then I got waylaid. So I actually began finding my real voice and telling stories about 20 years ago when I began writing about raising kids in suburbia. And that took me so many different places. Once you write, people read it and say, can you write this? Which I did. And the compilation book you're talking about, which I love to edit compilation books because you meet so many great people. That was such a great experience. That was just one of my best experiences. I love that. So since I've always been telling stories, I've also, many years ago, I auditioned and was going to be on a radio show, but then I moved. And I've always been interested in the audio portion of telling stories. So this summer, a friend introduced me to the StoryCorps app. StoryCorps is a nonprofit. You can read their stories. You can hear their stories on NPR, and they have an app, and they want people to interview other people for the real live human story. So when you interview on this app, you can't edit it. So you hear all the ums and the I don't knows and doors opening and closing. It's another amazing way to tell a story. And I love the audio part of it. It's live and it's in the moment, like, with podcasts. So it is a compliment to what I write about people, because I love writing about people, interesting people. And so it's a compliment. So every podcast, well, it's an audio cast. Every one I do, I also write something to go along with it. So for me, telling stories, it's writing, listening, talking, being in person and telling stories. That's also an amazing thing to do. We have something like that in the St. Louis community where you learn how to be a storyteller. And again, I've been a storyteller my whole life, so I could tell anybody's story. And I also found that it was very interesting to tell my own story. I didn't know really how people were going to connect to the story, but raising kids in suburbia, there were a lot of people who connected to it. And I always tell people it was always about my experience. I never threw anybody under the bus except myself, but there's a lot of humor in it too, because when you are raising kids, there has to be humor. So my kids are out of the house and I'm still telling stories on the journey that I've been on. And you and I have talked a little bit more about this, and I have been really learning what I want to do in the world and the work that I want to put out in the world. And I am really loving putting out positive, healthy stories and energy into the world. it's all about connection. We talked about that last week, and people connect to these stories. You always can find something that you can connect to. Even if, just recently I wrote about an injury, even if you've never been injured, if you read this story, you're going to be like, huh, well, that's interesting. How in the world did she do that? So it's a connection to other people. And I do believe that people smile. That was always my goal, is that you put a story out in the world and people smile and have something to say about it. And I've also learned that that helps people find their own voice and put their voice into the world, because everybody does have a story.
That's right. And we talked about how we're all drowning in content. There's so much content. We're just drowning in content. What we're all craving for and starving for right now is connection. One way to connect with other people are to read their stories. I just got done reading a book of a gentleman I met at a TV premiere, and he had a book he was writing all by himself, and he didn't really have these elaborate publishers, and it's just a story of them backpacking in the wilderness in Alaska. And I find it very intriguing to learn about people and the experiences and things that they had gone through and get the lessons learned out of those stories. And so I love what you do because of that. You're also a blogger. You tell stories through blogging. We have several of your links here that everyone will be able to follow. I even dropped the StoryCorps app, so that people can see that as well. And those stories. I think you were right spot on, Pam, when you said that when someone else hears another person's story, they feel empowered to share their own. So many individuals shy away or pull back because they're afraid that their story isn't important. No one needs to hear their story. Why would anyone even be to care to listen to their story? Which is so not true. One tiny story of someone's bravery could change another person's life, could change our life. Every single one of us that are listening here today. And so I love that is your core reason for doing what you do, to write. The way that you write is to share those stories, and you share stories not of just yourself, but also in doing the audios, you're sharing stories of others. What has been one of your favorite interviews that you did? Do you remember one lately that you did that
Oh,
you
yeah.
just, yeah.
So first of all, I love them all, because everybody, just like what you're saying, people are like, you really want to talk to me? But I think one of my very favorite, and that's like choosing your favorite kid. I interviewed the yoga teacher that I began with many, many years ago. And I'm very open that the yoga studio and those yoga instructors were part of saving my life a couple of years ago, for real. And to actually have her sit with me in the yoga studio, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And her telling the story of how she became a yoga instructor, and the energy that they feel in the room. And she's like, I remember what you went through, because there were times in the yoga studio that I was weeping. And when that first happened, I said, oh my gosh, is there something wrong? And you just become so open and vulnerable. So I have enjoyed every single StoryCorps interview. And actually, Colleen, you've inspired me, because my goal is to facilitate one StoryCorps interview a week. And I post all of that on my website, and you can find them. They're listed under podcasts because I haven't changed it yet. But I really loved that one. I learned a lot. I learned every single time I talk to somebody. And this is interesting. The interviews always go somewhere else. Like you can prepare all you want, but you ask one thing and it goes a completely different direction. And for me, I do think very fast on my feet. I always have. So that is like a really good skill for me when somebody changes the direction of an audio interview, and I just go with it, because I'm like, well, this must be important. So, and going back to what you said, that everybody's story is really important. That's one of the reasons StoryCorps wants people to interview other people. And that is honestly one of the reasons that I write. I write about fascinating people, like the Muppets in my neighborhood, the neighbors, the Muppets in my world, because I find people really, really fascinating. And it does start in St. Louis, because that's where I am. But I honestly, I'd love to get in a car and just drive. Remember, Charles Corral did On the Road. How cool would that be? That you just get on the road and you tell these really amazing stories from, I'm not on the Today Show, but I'm a person that's telling stories. So I love that. And then I also started writing travel blogs because I love to travel. And it occurred to me that if people enjoy the style of how I write, which is very personal, maybe they would enjoy that talking about where I've traveled. So my travel blogs aren't, well, go to this restaurant because. Instead, it's more of the personal narrative where I couldn't decide where to go. So I looked at all these places and then I went here and this is what I did. And, I take pictures everywhere. I talk about, I'm such a food person and I talk about all that. I talk about talking with the ocean when I'm at the ocean. And so many people say, oh yeah, I talk to the ocean too. So you're right. Everybody finds something that they can identify with in the audio interviews and the written personal narrative blogs. And that is what I really, really love. I am a people person, and to create a community like that. And I want people to feel like they can tell their story and however they want. And I'm happy. I was a book coach for many years too. So I can help people tell their stories. And people are so fascinated because they'll be like, I'm not really sure. And I'm like, no, tell me. And it's so wonderful and amazing and kind when you show up, you appear, and you listen for somebody else to be present and listen and recognize that story is important. That's an incredible feeling. That's why I've decided to do what I do.
So Wilson Writing, WilsonMentoringWriting.com is your website. We have that up there. We also have links of your Facebook. They can find you at Wilson Writing. They can connect with you on LinkedIn. Anyone that's watching this can connect with you. You're tagged on the event, plus, this video, plus I'll put your name again in the comments. And then, of course, you can go check out all of her StoryCorps interviews that she's done. What I love so much about what you're sharing today, Pam, is that we never know what we're going to learn from another person. And I truly believe that if we stay quiet and we don't share our wisdom and we don't share our feelings, that we're taking that knowledge and empowerment away from someone else. When I talk about we're drowning in content, I'm not saying that someone needs to speak up and just teach and teach and teach and teach. I feel like just sharing on a podcast, sharing like you are today about why you do what you do and the reasons why you enjoy doing it and what your future looks like in interviewing and blogging. And you're hoping that someone will find inspiration, will find empowerment, will find connection with either something you're doing, a place that you've been, or a person that you've interviewed. And I think that's huge. That's why podcasts exist. It's why the StoryCorps app exists. It's why we listen to NPR. I mean, I could go on and on for all of the things that we listen to. It's why people write biographies, so we can learn from their stories. And some of us are just intrigued because we want to know what their life has been like. And it's to me, when I learn about someone in history that has been through something like, the Great Depression or the Holocaust, or, has immigrated over from another country, and we hear the adversity they've been through and the challenges, sometimes in our lives that might help keep us moving because we feel like our problems aren't that big, right? It really...
And the experiences that somebody has. So you're exactly right. When you read about those experiences, you can think, okay, how did she do that? Or the biographies you're talking about, how did that person survive? Or how did they get through the day? And that is what people are actually connecting to. Like if you read that somebody, many years ago, I was doing things and writing about. So laughingly, I would try all these different things. I tried synchronized swimming with the St. Louis synchronized swimming team. People were like, well, she can do that, then I can try something too. And it's exactly what you're talking about. People are so brave and so courageous, and the experiences that we all have, we make up the human experience.
Yeah.
And, on millions of years, when they find the StoryCorps archives or they find this particular podcast, people are going to be like, wow, like they were like winning it. They were doing it. They were being seen and they were putting wonderful things out into the world. Yeah. And I think that's really from my heart, is that putting positive energy and stories into the world to inspire other people and to let people know that there's other people out there. I find that really heartwarming. And I'm learning more about that. And I love doing this. And I'm going to keep doing it. So read along with
I'm
me.
glad you said that. I read an excerpt in a book of, it was a Navy SEAL had said that when he got to the gates to meet God and it was his final day, God read out all of these amazing things that he had done. And he looked at God and he said, wait a minute, that's not my life. And he said to him, you're right. This is the life that could have been. It was laid out for you, but you chose not to play. So how interesting is that, that our life is laid out for us and it's here. You're a writer. You do stories. That's what you do, Pam. I was called to bring people's voices to the forefront, to hold space for them, to believe in them, to show them what's possible. And that's what I do really, really well. But the writing and the blogging and the storytelling and the things that you do, I mean, I could never have written my first chapter, which got me to wanting to write more books and do more of what I do today without your assistance. So we really are all here to support each other. And we don't realize how much other people are watching us, need our stories, need the inspiration, need the motivation, and need the empowerment that we give them by speaking up, because we're giving ourselves the permission, which in turn, they get to give themselves permission to do the same.
And believe me, when I put something out in the world, I always think, and I've been doing this for over 20 years on the internet. Okay. So, I mean, when I put something on the world, I always think, who's going to read this? What's going to happen? And I'm always so surprised that people do read it and they text, they call, they email, and they're like, oh, I just read this and this happened to me, or I know that person. So you just never know who you're going to touch. It's like that story about the old man and the little boy on the beach. Do you know the starfish story?
Mm-hmm.
Where the old man, I guess, is throwing
couldn't possibly throw them all back.
Right. Well, you're helping this one. And so if, like you say, one of your podcasts or something, you've helped somebody find and use their voice, you've empowered them. Same thing is that if somebody reads something and they think, oh, okay. Or even if I just make somebody laugh, because most of the time when you read things that I'm doing, I am the one that's like, how in the world? Like, I always feel like, Lucy, how did that happen? Like, what did I do to bring that on? But then, people enjoy that too. So putting whatever energy you can into the world. And the positive, healthy energy, that to me is a gift. And so thank you for doing it. I am so glad the universe had a plan for us to meet, because we have touched base so many times over the years. And I appreciate so much about what you do. I love being in your community. And I'm so thankful that I have found you again and that you wanted to know more about my writing. So thank you.
Well, I think the world needs to know more about your writing and your adventures. So again, go to wilsonmentoringwriting.com. You can also follow Pam on Facebook at Wilson Writing. We have all these links already down there for you. LinkedIn, you can connect with her at Pam Wilson. She just is absolutely gorgeous. And then go check out her StoryCorps app that she does with all of the different interviews that she's been doing and logging on there. So thank you so much, Pam, for being with us today. It was my honor and pleasure to spotlight you to so many people in the reach of my social media, through LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, for us to be able to share your story today. You're leading the way.
So much. Thank you so much. This has really been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
All right. To all of you that are here today, thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to remind you to go crush your week. Let's do this. See you guys. Bye-bye.